NPA is still plotting its next move after failing to win convictions in the Nulane state capture case. On Friday, the case, you remember how the case had been described as the blueprint for state capture. In the end, on Friday, Iqbal Sharma and the others who were accused of taking money from the state for the Guptas were acquitted. The judge saying there was evidence the government lost 25 million rand, but that the institutions that were supposed to prove who stole the money and where the money had gone had failed. Paul Holden is the person who investigated the flow of money during the state capture era. He testified at the Zondo Commission about how money flowed out of our government, out of our country, to the Guptas. Paul, good afternoon to you, and I appreciate the time. Firstly, for you to investigate, to follow the money, how difficult was that, to see where it came from, our government, and where it went to?
I mean, that part was relatively straightforward. I mean, the Commission was very good at cleaning bank statements and allowing us to trace those funds. I mean, as far as I understand, in this case, what happened was that the financial investigator had access to that material. Then the Guptas put up a defense which he wasn't prepared to answer, which included statements about how the flow of money wasn't problematic because it was all based on sort of loan agreements that he hadn't seen before. So he was sort of caught off guard when he was then being cross-examined about his analysis.
So the evidence is there. I mean, right? The evidence was accepted by the Zondo Commission, but didn't end up being used by the court.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is that the Zondo Commission relied on and admitted the Gupta leaks. Which is a really absolutely key piece of evidence, because what it does is it shows the Guptas were definitely in control of certain companies based in Dubai to whom the money went. But the courts in this instance, what happened was that the NPA were going to rely on the Gupta leaks. It got to the point where they were about to admit it. And then it was challenged by the Gupta's lawyer, a guy called Mike Helland, Advocate Mike Helland. And the NPA just basically wasn't prepared at that point to argue for the admission of the Gupta leaks from a technical perspective, which means that they were totally excluded from the hearings and from the trial. And from there, it was pretty much a downhill slope, because if you don't have the Gupta leaks admitted in that trial, it's a very hard case to make. One hopes that, with other cases where they rely on the Gupta leaks, they will be properly prepared to argue that. I think it's really quite worrying, pretty damning, in fact, that they went into that trial without a way to get them admitted.
I find it amazing that the NPA wasn't prepared for this. I mean, surely they should have known that this would come up. I mean, it was obvious that it would.
Yeah, I'm similarly very confused. I have to admit, I don't understand how this case was prepared in such a way that you have to rely on the Gupta leaks, but you don't have a way to argue it. And I think there was a specialist, I'm only following this in the news, because I wasn't in court, of course, but apparently there was a specialist who potentially talked to the admission of the Gupta leaks, but that the prosecutor wasn't ready to argue it at the time. And I don't really understand how that can be the case. I mean, I think if you're going to rely on this information, it's going to be challenged. That's been the Gupta's strategy since the Gupta leaks started, was to deny their authenticity. You'd expect there to be a very powerful argument in place using legal precedent to say, the Zondo Commission accepted it. There's all this technical data showing it's legitimate and accurate. It should be admitted here. And then on that basis, the case can be made more simply.
There are other ways of looking at this. So, I mean, I understand that you and I may have a view. You're the person who did the investigations. You know where all the money went. And not all of that evidence would be accepted by the courts. I understand that. The evidence that you've seen, so without the Gupta leaks, would it be impossible to get a conviction? Is it that simple? To get a conviction, you would need to have the Gupta leaks accepted.
I think you could potentially find a creative way of getting over that hurdle if you had a full view of all the information that was already in the public domain. So to give you an example, I was just thinking about this today in relation to this case, is that the Gupta leaks show very clearly the Guptas controlling this one particular company called Gateway, which was based in Dubai. And that was the company to where the Nulane money eventually landed, was in the Gupta's Gateway account. That's very clear from the Gupta leaks that it's definitely controlled by them. But there is also an additional piece of information that was part of my evidence bundle of the Zondo Commission, which was admitted, that could be admitted far more easily into a court, which is when Standard Chartered Bank, which is a UK-registered bank, but their Dubai branch shut down Gateway's accounts because they were worried about the exposure of the Guptas to state capture, and that proves that they have some sort of control over Gateway. So there were definitely creative ways of dealing with the issue if you couldn't get the Gupta leaks admitted. My sense from afar is that once the Gupta leaks weren't admitted, that the whole case just sort of fell apart, and these sort of it was probably too late to even think of these creative solutions. I really, really hope that going forward, the NPA thinks about consulting multiple different people and multiple different prosecutors as to the best strategy to go forward, and relies on best practice from prosecutors in South Africa, which I'm sure there's great prosecutors waiting in the wings, but also prosecutors who have real experience, hard-nosed experience in prosecuting complex cases. Like, I'm pretty sure authorities in the US and other countries would offer their assistance if the request was made.
Well, absolutely, and prosecutors around the world have the same interest. They want to see justice being done. So do citizens. Paul, I mean, probably no one understands the way these monies flow better than you do. Did they ask you for advice? I mean, it seems that the NPA said so clearly that this was an important case. They said that it really mattered and seemed to just fold. That's my phrase, not yours, but I think maybe we're saying the same thing. I mean, did anyone ask you for advice in this case?
The short answer is no. I wasn't asked to assist in the case at all. I'm not quite sure why. Obviously, if I was approached by the NPA, I'd be more than happy to help. I'm not going to pretend like I would have been some sort of silver bullet getting over the problems at trial potentially. But going ahead, if the request was made to me to help the NPA, I'd be very happy to jump in and provide whatever thoughts I have about the evidence and how to get over these hurdles in future. But the short answer is no, I wasn't asked.
Is there any doubt in your mind that it was the Guptas who benefited from what happened in the Nulane case?
No. I think it's, when you look at the Gupta leaks, it's abundantly clear that that Gateway was controlled by the Guptas. And that is just, in my mind, sort of beyond doubt, based on what we see from the Gupta leaks, what we see from the extent of the financial flows to Gateway. I mean, don't forget that Gateway benefited from other corrupt deals, not just Nulane. Gateway was the biggest recipient of money off the Astina scandal. And the Gupta leaks showed very clearly that the Guptas were behind all of the Astina deal from beginning to end. That the money went into Gateway, and the money went from Gateway back into Gupta companies in South Africa. So, to my mind, there's no doubt that where money went to Gateway, it benefited the Guptas.
The other risk, of course, is to the morale of the NPA. Failed in this case, failed spectacularly, received a tongue-lashing from the judge. The worry is that there might never now be justice for what happened during the state capture era. Even the Guptas are scot-free, and the person who probably signed the decision not to extradite them from the United Arab Emirates had a great weekend in the Eastern Cape on a runway that we provided for him.
No, I think it is a real worry. I think this is a really key moment. We had the Zonda Commission, which is this incredible exercise in sort of public accountability and openness. But of course, the Commission of Inquiry has different rules of evidence, and this is sort of where the real test of South Africa's institutions was going to happen, was around these cases. And it is very worrying that we failed this first test. The litigation strategy that was announced at the very beginning was that they would pursue what were called low-hanging fruit cases, which is cases they should be able to win easily before moving on to more complex cases. And this is probably the lowest hanging fruit, and it's failed. So, I really hope that the NPA learns from it. It's incredibly disappointing, it's incredibly dispiriting, but at the same time, people lose cases all the time. And even the best prosecutors in the world will lose a case. So the NPA needs to show a bit of mettle, dust itself off, and get back at the ring, properly prepared, and with all the tools at its disposal to bring the best possible case against these people, because it's absolutely important. It's vital that we see these people held to account in some way.
Paul Holden, thank you. One of the people who investigated the flow of money for the Zonda Commission. Really do appreciate the time.